Hi, my name is Vanessa, and I am a licensed counselor who primarily works with children and has been working with children with a variety of behavioral issues for the last 10 years.
Hey, and I'm Philip, and I'm an educator. I work a lot with a wide range of youth as well, and yeah, I've encountered a lot of different types of people in my lifetime. And yeah, today we wanted to talk a little bit about trauma and what the what are some of the effects that it can have on people at a young age and as an adult.
So, what are things that can cause trauma? And I know there's a variety of issues such as family, traumatic relationships experiences, cultural background, different parenting styles. What is your take on it, Philip?
My take on trauma, well, yeah, um, you have emotional type of traumas and you also have physical type of trauma, so they can come in different forms, and things such as actually even witnessing things can have an effect. For example, spousal abuse, how does that affect another person, right? We might see that as, well, this is a normal thing, so how am I going to handle my issues when I have someone else? Well, I might end up hitting them as well, because that's normal to them, right? This is just what they've seen. Other things could be witnessing perhaps a car accident that can really scar you.
Or even a death, a tragic death, especially even depending how they lost a person
Yeah,
and what circumstances it was in.
yeah, and then of course we have different things like emotional trauma. So just think about having maybe tiger parents or
What
parents
is tiger parents?
tiger parenting.
And where is that common?
Oh, yikes. Well, tiger parenting, basically, parents that hover every single thing that they do, that their own child does. They make sure that they know exactly what they're doing. They expect 100% on everything that their child does. It's
So basically, unrealistic expectations of a child, and just from what you're saying, I could see that could definitely really put an impact in a child's self-esteem, give them a distorted perception of who they are, what they're supposed to achieve in this lifetime, and not normalizing failure.
Yeah, I honestly think that it will have a lot of detrimental effects for sure, because just imagine if you're always striving for perfection, right? You're gonna you're gonna have kids that are so worried about failing or not doing well that it's also gonna result in things that are gonna ultimately make them fail. Because what happens when a kid wants to pass or wants to do well so badly? Well, are they going to accept that, hey, maybe they got a few questions wrong, or are they going to be like trying to cheat on their tests? I mean, there's more to it than just that, but those are some of the behaviors that you're going to notice in some of those kids who are super afraid of not doing well in school or something like that.
All right. So, in your own words, what exactly does trauma mean to you? I mean, you go first, and then I'll go after you,
What does trauma
because it
mean
could
to me?
definitely have different meanings to everyone.
Whew. Well, these are any type of experiences that a person may feel that is going to hinder so, perhaps social aspects of their life. It will have different impacts on how they try to seek out certain types of relationships, the type of people. It could cause things like anxiety ridden type of behavior, not being able to form healthy relationships with other people as well. So, yeah, emotional trauma can cause things like high anxiety, the mistrust of other people, um, learning how to really cover up a lot of their mistakes. But we can see things such as cognitive
Different
delays,
plays.
and just because if you get scouted a lot, well, not only are you going to become more anxious about doing something, you're probably going to start learning how to avoid things. And let's face it, avoiding
Avoiding things
things,
is a coping skill.
it's a coping skill, because it kind of, by avoiding it, you kind of put yourself as, hey, look, I didn't actually have to do something, so I don't know if I actually failed at it. But it also puts you in a situation where you do not actually learn how to overcome things, and you just learn how to avoid things. And every single time you encounter something that's new to you and you're afraid to not do well in it, well, you're just going to become more anxious. But now you've learned how to avoid things without actually learning skills to overcome those deficits. I hope,
Oh, that's
I
a
don't know
very
if
good.
I
Yeah,
don't know
that's
if
a
I
very
answered
good
your question or
explanation.
not.
No, you did.
I kind of
And I
deviated,
know
I
like
guess.
trauma can mean like different to everybody. And just know that somebody who appears high functioning, happy, resilient, they could have trauma too, compared to someone where the signs are visible. Where, again, Philip, you showed. I mean, you explained some signs, but it could manifest differently in different people, and people carry it differently. Trauma, it could result in a variety of issues, such as the family background that they grew up in, witnessing or experiencing traumatic relationships, um, and it could definitely impact just how they navigate life and relationships they gravitate towards in the future, a distorted perception of self, signs of trauma. Oh, we'll talk about the signs.
Signs.
Yeah, some of it can be like, I guess, to a certain period, isolation, the inability to build healthy relationships with others. And again, this could also be a coping skill to protect themselves from getting hurt or fear of being left. Also, like on an emotional, psychological level, disturbances in sleep, nightmares, flashbacks. So, I know we're talking about trauma, but also like there's also post traumatic stress disorder too, where it could disrupt your day to day life, where it really interferes with you building healthy relationships or opening up to, possibilities for you in the future, or affect areas such as your work. And
Yeah, actually, here, I'll talk a little bit about trauma right here. Has anyone ever
okay.
played the game Cuphead? That game is actually so hard. It's pretty much the modern day Contra. Okay? So
Okay.
maybe I'm just not as good at games too, but this was super hard. Okay. But I kind of want to also expand on what you're saying as well in terms of developing things with relationships and things like that, right? Because of that lack of self-esteem, you are also likely to seek out relationships that might be similar to what you've experienced already, right? So I'm just saying, if more likely than not, statistically speaking, when a parent comes from a an abusive spousal family, or from an abusive parent, there's a very good chance that that child, as they continue to grow up, will continue that type of behavior because that's become a normalized behavior for them. Unfortunately, they don't know what a healthy, normal, romantic relationship looks like. And I think when they start to experience that, they start to get uncomfortable about it, and they kind of self sabotage it because they're just, this is completely new to them. They don't know what it's like to be properly talked to, respected, and things like that.
And that's why the formative years are crucial. And sometimes we forget that children, I know there's this saying where children never listen. Children, do you believe children are always listening?
I think they're always listening. They just don't necessarily comprehend what everything means.
But they're always watching too. They see how you deal with stress related issues, how you talk to mom or dad, how you cope. They hear conversations that you think they're not hearing. This is my personal belief, and we were both kids once. I do believe children are more observant than we think, and they're definitely smarter than we think. They do pick up on things fast, and a child learns what they see.
Yeah. I mean, to expand on that too, I think kids are also a little more resilient than we give them credit for as well. But yeah, I mean, I was going to talk about that on a different episode later on. But yeah, well, shoot, I was going to expand on something that you had mentioned about oh, right. So what I've noticed is when I see kids coming from certain homes. So I used to have to. I worked in some pretty rougher areas in the city, and you know, when I look at some of the kids, with their upbringing, I remember parents that would be passed out. A lot of parents that be swearing at the kid. A lot of uh, they come up they often come in with a scent of either marijuana or some other really foul scents. Um, and when I see that kid coming into my classroom, I sometimes think to myself, you know what? This kid could be a lot worse based on the environment that he was raised in. If anything, this is what I mean by kids are a little bit more resilient than we give them credit for. They come into my class, the fact that their parents were swearing at them, they probably there was a I'll explain another story in a sec, but the fact that they're here today, they're they're hungry, they're tired, they're exhausted, but they're here, like A plus to you for just showing up, right? And not exactly giving me a hard time about it. But one of the things that I'm going to notice is like academics is kind of not in their repertoire at the moment.
But
What's up?
oh, sorry, I interrupted. But also, as a teacher, do you also think school is their safe space?
I think it can be a safe space as long as you create an environment. Now, here's the thing. I always, based on where I've worked, that safe space, when you see kids lashing out, it doesn't necessarily make them bad kids. Okay, what I think is that a lot of these kids are acting the way they act because they're kind of in. I mean, if you're familiar with this, but they're in fight or flight. They're constantly in fight or flight mode every single day. These are the same type of behaviors that they have used, and they are still alive as a result. So why not continue this bad behavior, right?
So fight or flight, that would also, in other words, that would be survival mode.
These kids are in constant survival mode.
And that's probably the only way they know how to respond to things.
Exactly. They come into my classroom. Yeah, they're hungry. The last thing that they probably are concerned about right now is learning because they're in constant surviving mode or survival mode right now. And, you know, okay, so this is a story that I want to talk about. I had a student who came in late for my class. We start class at 9. He came in at 9:30. He walks into my class. Rather than me saying, hey, like, you're in some big trouble. I mean, you're coming into my class half hour late. What gives, right? I kind of pulled the kid to the side, and I'm like, hey, so what happened that day? Or what happened to make you so late today? Because you're usually pretty on time. And you know what? He opened up to me, straight up said, hey, his mom passed out. He had to take care of his sister to come into class.
Okay. So, like, you doing that, I would think that created that safe space for your for the child or student, child and student, and that, and you also gave that student the opportunity to share what they needed to say, and it sounded like it was pretty a genuine reason. And again, like, you never know what people are going through.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know what a kid's going through.
So instead of scolding them, you gave them an opportunity to share what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I never taught the sister, but the sister was always really adorable. Always said hi to me, even though I didn't actually teach her. But she was like, "Oh, you're well, I don't want to drop names, but we'll just use the word Bob. Oh, you're Bob's teacher." And I was like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And so, you know, the guy, before he even like sat down and started learning anything, I kind of just gave him some cereal and granola bars before he started class, because really, you gotta kind of start at the basic needs. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but you know, if they can't solve the hunger part, they can't get to the next step in you know.
So you did those gestures too, also to let the student know that you were there. Again, creating that safe space, creating that space for trust and non-judgment. And I personally believe, as a therapist, to build that trust, especially with a child, it's not created through times where we're asking them direct questions. It's being present for them, keeping your word, building moments through even just small moments like building a puzzle or remembering certain things that they said, checking in on them. That's also like creating that deep bond. It's not going to be through moments where you're scolding them or
that's right. I mean, we
intervening.
We've got to go back to the basics. If you're familiar with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We need to satisfy certain things first before we can kind of progress them to become more I guess, enriched, if you will. But I mean, the most basic thing is
Just to,
survival needs.
yeah, and just to create that trust between like that therapeutic relationship.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, how does one person deal with or help another child who has trauma?
Help another child with trauma.
Hmm.
Um, just normalize their feelings. Um, Obviously, I think it's important to be mindful. Um, Even if, like from the outside looking in, someone can seem like they have it all. Like they have a big house, they have like a family who is well off. Like it doesn't mean that they're not going through anything.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of want to
And
just
also not
elaborate
minimizing.
on that part too, right? If you're, unfortunately, you see it a lot in impoverished areas, right? People don't come with a lot of all the basic needs that are met. But at the same time, you'd be very surprised about how many people that come from a very affluent meaning like successful parents, they're well off social economically. You see that a lot too because rather they almost have like the on the opposite spectrum. They don't have enough. Well, these people have the high demands to almost meet these impossible things that their parents expect of them, and so they this type of emotion or this type of experience is a little bit different. Just imagine coming from an affluent area, right? You're expected to suddenly go to get 100% in all your courses. Then you're expected to have to dance or play the piano. Then you got to go to math or ABLE school. I'm not knocking ABLE or anything or math school. I'm just saying the demands to know how to play a piano, go to math school, do ballet, all on the weekends. You basically don't get rest, and imagine the type of pressure that can put on another student as well, right? Or just on a kid. Like these are kids; they really should be learning.
And it's important to normalize mistakes, right? I
Yes.
think that's just an important tool for their development and just who they'll become as a person.
Yeah,
It's
no,
important to normalize mistakes and
you
failures.
have to be okay with not being perfect at everything. Okay, like that's such a important. It's such an important mindset to understand that in order to really learn and to advance yourself, you got to learn from your mistakes because that's really the only way to get better. I always say it's better to make mistakes and learn from it than to ever avoid something because you're afraid to make mistakes. And really, I don't think scolding the person is going to encourage any type of self-esteem. Really, now by like if Vanessa, if she can't do a certain math problem, and every single time she gets something wrong, and I start yelling at her, really, I think she's just gonna avoid math entirely.
Yeah, and inevitably that's just going to create anxiety with other things. It's not just math, but even say in the down the road, I'm 24 years old, starting my career. I'm going to have a lot of fears making mistakes, and that's not realistic,
Yeah.
right? And that's just going to create more stress as an adult.
So yeah, I mean the main thing here is to learn how to be okay with making a mistake, but also learning
Okay.
from it how to do something better. So yeah, I mean, how do we help with a child that has trauma? I guess going back to that question,
Yeah.
we
Right.
want we kind of deviated a little bit, but here's the thing: how do we deal with someone that has trauma? Well, you gotta have someone that is willing to be there and listen, I guess, genuinely with that person.
And just
Or
give
to
them
that
an
person, I
open
mean.
space to express what's happening with them on their own terms. I think, like from my experiences working with children, I think when someone goes to us when they're having troubles, it's easy to think the thing that they need the most is advice or to know exactly what to say. But just remember that there's always different ways to show that you're present, even if it's silent. I just dealing with kids now or working with kids. I go with less is more. It's not about advice. It's not about knowing what to say. It's not. I try not to be as solution focused. I try to be present as possible, normalizing their feelings, not shaming them for what they feel, and just validating negative feelings and just being present. And I know there are children who respond well to sense of touch, just me reflecting their feelings back to them, like to let them know that I heard them and I understand what they're saying. Even those things are like just as powerful than knowing exactly what to say or to provide solutions.
Yeah, having that good social network is going to be very important. That probably plays one of the biggest roles in helping a person. Now, of course, that also entails that you are talking and hanging around with the right people as well. Um, Another thing that
But okay, I'm gonna twist it a little bit. You said hanging out with the right people, but how can someone who grew up in homes with certain family backgrounds where it wasn't the healthiest,
yeah,
how would they know what's healthy
yeah, that's a big one.
relationship? Yeah,
Oh, Vanessa, man, you're throwing me all these
I know,
twists.
because I really do believe that children, they learn what they see. And again, I think early on I said children are sponges and they gravitate to what they witnessed early on in their life, because again, like Philip too, he said it's normal for them and
Yeah.
it's familiar. And
Yeah, and that's actually kind of how I want to answer that question right there. Unfortunately, we have people that are going to not have perhaps the best self esteem. They might be very troubled. Unfortunately, people are very good at finding familiarity because when we see familiarity, we gravitate towards that. We want to say, hey, look, this person is going through the same problem with me. Perhaps that is something that is someone that I want to be with as well because they're going through the same struggle. Now the problem about that too is there's can be a lot of negative consequences as well because if somebody lashes out and acts out aggressively, unfortunately you also associate yourself to more of that type of behavior. Um, and it's that familiarity piece, right? And what you end up might what you might end up getting is just having people with the same types of problems acting out in the same type of manner, but it's even more difficult now because they're now in their pack or in their group, and that can be kind of more problematic because you also not only do we seek out people more like that, we just have a bigger pack of a lot of people who might end up resorting to doing certain things that we as society would kind of look down towards. I mean, unfortunately, coming from an unhealthy home, or not, sorry, not an unhealthy home, but coming from a home that may be very disruptive, very abusive, well, more often than that, statistically speaking, you are probably going to have a higher rate of aggressive actions, doing things like theft because this brings a thrill.
so impulsive behavior.
Yes, very impulsive type of behaviors. And now, just think about that, but multiplied by your group size, and that's not going to help with things. I mean, here's the thing: a lot of the times, more often than not, who you hang out with is also a reflection of you.
I do believe that.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I mean, dealing with people, or sorry, in terms of dealing with how to help with trauma and things like that, I think a very effective tool is journaling, writing down how you felt on certain days, basically finding out what triggers you and learning what can you do to improve on perhaps you might have lashed out on something that you felt kind of scared about. Doing things like meditation, doing things like just learning how to breathe properly.
Just to make you back in tune with yourself. And I think these are more also emotional ways, spiritual self-care for just getting in touch with your needs.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
And journaling is a good way to detect exactly what you're feeling. I'm not sure if you've ever done this in school where sometimes a teacher will ask each student, "What are you feeling today?" Have they done that with you? And then you gotta
maybe
put one. Actually, as
back
a
in elementary.
child therapist, I do have a mood board, and how I begin my session is I present the mood board and I get the child to tell me exactly what they're feeling. And that's also a good exercise, even if it seems simple, to get in touch with their emotions and to detect exactly what's happening.
Hmm.
And that's also a way of building that self awareness.
Yeah. I mean, reading self-help books is also another thing. Now, reading is a very underrated activity. You can
It
learn
is.
so much about things and how to just do things better.
So YouTube is a really good resource now, and there's a lot of credible references.
Try
I
to look for
know,
the credible ones. So
yeah, Patrick Tehan is actually a really good trauma therapist, and he specializes in childhood trauma. I believe, yeah, he's had years of experience, so check his channel out, Patrick Tehan.
I do wanted to just say one last point too,
Okay.
which is breathing techniques. Those are really, really important things to. I want to say control the temper, but also it prevents you from saying something that you're also going to regret. I mean, one of the things that we talked about for people that have stress and trauma is that they are often very impulsive and that they are very. They can often say something and possibly regret it after. But by breathing, you allow yourself a few seconds to kind of just slow things down a little bit. Think about what you're going to say. When you think about what you're going to say, ask yourself this: is it one, is it appropriate, and two, is it productive? And if it doesn't meet either criteria,
So it also, sorry.
oh wow,
Oh yeah, so it also helps you. It sounds like breathing techniques. It helps you regulate your nervous system. Helps with emotional regulation.
that's right. And so it's a process. Okay, like I understand maybe you're watching this right now and you're thinking, oh yes, by watching this one video, it's gonna help me. Unfortunately, probably don't want to hear this,
It's
but it's a long journey.
it's a not an overnight process.
It's not. Don't expect anything to ever. Anything, I was once told this. Anything that's important to you, anything that's difficult, uh, is never going to be a overnight fix. It really isn't.
And especially working with young adults and children, I also try to normalize for them that healing, there's no finish line. It's a lifelong journey. 100% like with commitment and the consistency and exploring different coping skills that work for you. There will definitely be progress, but I would really not encourage my clients to think that there is a finish line, because I think self work in general, not just trauma, it's a lifelong
That's
commitment,
a lifelong
right?
commitment for sure. I mean, if you think that you are a perfect person, might be an ego thing. But here's the thing: one of the things that you are going to experience, people that have any type of trauma, is that anger is going to be an emotion that they feel. Okay, and just understand that that's normal. Okay, by being angry, for one, it makes you human. Okay, don't think for a moment that just because you're angry, that it makes you a bad person. All right, you gotta understand that that's a normal. It's a normal impulse, but how we cope with the anger is something else that we need to work on as well. One of the things that people have also gotten really good at is also just hiding. We didn't talk about hiding anger or hiding like thoughts and things.
No, that's
right?
all. That's also avoidant. It sounds like, right? Hiding.
There's hiding, but people have become very good at hiding some of their deficits. And so we have to always remember that becoming a master of hiding things, hiding your lack of a particular skill, or hiding, we need to understand that there are going to be people that can help you. Okay, and it's okay to admit that you are struggling with something. I think that's an important piece, because if you have your friends, you know that your real friends are the ones that are going to want the best for you. And
I believe it's also a coping skill or a way from protecting them from the pain
yeah,
to be in
absolutely.
denial of their experiences. So also it may take a lot for someone to admit that they need help, and it's another to take the steps to actually do something about it.
I mean, yeah, a little quick note on that. Don't let your ego be too big
Mm-hmm.
that you're not willing to accept help or to accept that you might be flawed. Okay, I
Mm-hmm.
think when the ego gets in the way of things, that really prevents a person from being able to actually, well, it puts a block on the road to recovery or to improving themselves.
Mm-hmm. I know we talked about more of the approaches that we can do on our own time, which I think is great because I also know that therapy can be quite expensive and that resource isn't available to everyone. But as a therapist, I do recommend seeking someone who specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy, um, psychoanalytical Adlerian therapy approach. And this approach, it's more goal focused, problem focused, and it's step-by-step process where the therapist helps the clients walk through their past experiences and of course in a gentle way, um, to get a better understanding of what happened to you and to help modify negative thinking patterns. And again, this isn't an overnight process and it may take a while because like of course like it may be triggering. The last thing we want is to come to face with what hurt us, but I think just doing that will also help build resiliency in clients, help them see things through a new light. Perhaps, I mean, nobody needs to accept the abuse or trauma, but also come to a point of acceptance and, you know, what to do about it. And just to know that, you know, your past doesn't define your future.
Nah, the only person that is in charge of your future is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, here's another thing, a little bit of a side note. Like, where does anxiety actually stem from? And one of the theories is that, hey, anxiety comes from that lack of control. You know, the locus of control. People who are a little bit more anxious think that people
Mm-hmm.
are against them, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that and you think that everything it has more of an external type of
Mm-hmm.
cause for their problems. But you know what? The moment you start to learn how to take control of a scenario, this one I'm actually going to do a entirely different podcast about in terms of anxiety. But the moment you learn to take control of your own thoughts and feelings and your own surroundings better, you're going to notice that that anxiety is also going to reduce significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of, you know, it's not the kid's fault, but when they experience things like anxiety from the trauma
Mm-hmm.
at a young age, they can't control that part of watching
Mm-hmm.
watching the abuse that they may have seen their parents
Mm-hmm.
give each other, or even being abused as a child. Um, and so that part they couldn't control.
Mm-hmm.
However, we are able to, I mean, believe it or not, we are in control of how we can react and how we can respond to that type of trauma as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, in terms of being able to recover, it's kind of taking that control piece, which is going to help that anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm going to explain more about that in a different podcast, of course.
I like how you said that it's not the child's fault. So I'm going to revisit a topic that we talked about earlier, how you can support someone who's dealing with trauma again, like even reminding them that it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But yeah,
All
let's
right.
go wrap it up with hopefully you've learned and you've kind of got a little better understanding of what
Mm-hmm.
childhood trauma is and what it can do in terms of
Mm-hmm.
developing or sorry, in terms of what it can do for an adult. I mean,
All right.
we talked a little bit about relationships and how it
Mm-hmm.
can affect those type of relationship pieces. Um,
All
but
right.
yeah, and keep in mind, this is actually our first podcast,
Yeah.
so I'm actually super nervous about this thing right now. And so, but you know,
I
as
hope
a
it wasn't visible.
oh man,
So to close it out, what are three important things that you think a child needs? And I'll
three
go
important
second, yeah.
things that a child needs. Well, think something such as a good support system,
Mm-hmm.
healthy coping habits. I mean, these are a little bit vague that I'm listing, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, obviously a good healthy support system, a good coping mechanism, and the ability to, I guess, oh boy, I'm not thinking straight right now, but the ability to learn how to overcome obstacles. But those are from skills that you're going to have to develop over time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit vague, but yeah.
I mean, that's probably for our next podcast. Nurture,
Nurture.
consistency. I do believe that trust, it's not, it's for a child. I mean, I could be a little biased, but it's built through following through what you said,
Yeah.
being there during pickups or important events that the child has, such as parent teacher nights or concerts, or remembering their birthdays. I know that's important.
Okay, but I remember my dog's birthday, January 17th.
January's, that's your what?
That's Chloe's birthday.
Oh, okay. January's a, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as parents, it's easy to have this idea of what the child is going to become, or kind of pressing our lost dreams or things we want them to become on them. But just giving your child a space to grow into who they're going to become organically. I mean, I dream of my daughter being a ballerina, but who knows? They may not be a ballerina, right?
Oh my gosh.
And it's still about loving them for who they are.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Anyway, hopefully you enjoy the rest
Cheers.
of your day. Cheers. All right. But yeah, hopefully you took something from this podcast. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you all again. Or I guess you watching us again.
All right.